You ever woken up from a strange dream, one that felt too real, too intense, or too symbolic to just be your imagination? What if I told you that God has been speaking to you all along, every night, using dreams as divine whispers, quietly guiding you, warning you, protecting you? And what if the real reason you keep missing these messages is because of the narcissist in your life? Yes, the one who drains you, confuses you, distracts you. The chaos they create in your waking world is no accident. It's spiritual interference, designed to keep you blind to the truth God is trying to show you in the quiet hours. You see, chosen ones don't get ordinary dreams. Your dreams are missions, instructions from a higher place. And tonight, we're going to decode 7 powerful dream signs from God that most people overlook, but you can't afford to miss. Especially not now. Because the battle isn't just in your relationships, it's in your sleep. Stay with me until the end, because the last one might explain the strange dream you've had for years. And if anything resonates, don't just scroll. Leave a comment and tell us your dream. You're not alone in this. And if you're new here, subscribe. You're waking up for a reason. While the world sleeps in silence, you, the chosen one, begin to wander through realms most never see. You close your eyes, and suddenly, you're running through a house you've never lived in, speaking with someone who's no longer alive, or standing in a storm that never touches your skin. Strange? Maybe. But random? Never. You see, not all dreams are dreams. Some are messages, blueprints, warnings, divine codes written in symbols, wrapped in mystery, delivered straight from heaven to your soul. But here's the tragedy. You often forget them. Or worse, you ignore them. Not because you don't care, but because you've been spiritually distracted, confused, drained. And it's not by accident. There is a force working overtime to keep you from seeing clearly, a presence that operates in the background, slowly pulling you away from your discernment. Sometimes, that force looks like chaos. Sometimes, it looks like anxiety. But often, it wears the face of someone close. A narcissist. A person who speaks loud, so you stop listening to your own inner voice. A person who controls and manipulates, so your attention is stolen. A person who mocks or belittles, so you question your spiritual instincts. You don't even realize it's happening, but every time they draw you into their storm, you miss another divine whisper meant only for you. Because here's the truth. As a chosen one, your life is marked by purpose, even in the dark. Especially in the dark. That means your dreams are sacred ground. They are how heaven bypasses the noise and reaches you where no one else can. When you're asleep, your soul is awake. And in those sacred hours, you receive pieces of the puzzle. Instructions, warnings, confirmations. But if your spirit is weary from constant emotional warfare with a narcissist, you won't recognize what you've been given. You'll dismiss it, or forget it, or wake up too numb to even care. How many times have you woken up knowing something powerful just happened, but the details slipped through your fingers like water? You feel the weight of the message, but it's blurry. You're distracted, emotionally hungover from yesterday's chaos. You see, that's not a coincidence. That's warfare. Because if the enemy can't destroy the message, he'll make you forget it. And if he can't make you forget it, he'll send someone to convince you it never meant anything. That it was just a dream. That you're too sensitive. That you're imagining things. But you're not imagining this. You never were. Your dreams have always been the battleground of revelation. They've shown you who to trust, who to leave, what's coming, what's hidden. But that narcissist in your life? They've become a wall between you and the interpretation. A blocker. Because if you ever saw the full picture, if you ever woke up to the truth God has been planting in your subconscious all along, you'd walk away from everything that was designed to keep you small. And that scares them. Because narcissists thrive in confusion. They need you uncertain, off balance, doubting yourself. They don't want you realizing how powerful you are when you're spiritually alert. When you're aligned. When you've decoded the messages that were meant only for you. Because when you do, their power breaks. Their manipulation loses its grip. And you begin to walk in purpose, not pain. Let me ask you, have you been having strange dreams lately? Have they felt repetitive? Intense? Have you seen things in your sleep that you don't understand, but can't shake either? That's not random. That's revelation. The divine is still speaking. God is still delivering messages. He never stopped. You just got distracted by the wrong voice. It's time to listen again. It's time to protect your spiritual quiet, to detox from the emotional noise, to create space so that when the message comes, you're ready. Because you can't keep waking up with broken pieces and wondering what they mean. You can't keep letting someone else's dysfunction rob you of divine instruction. Your dreams are holy. They are the journal of your higher calling. They are written in metaphor and mystery because God knows that truth is safest in the secret. He knows you've been under attack. He knows they tried to confuse you. And still, He speaks. Through numbers. Through storms. Through unfamiliar faces. Through déjà vu. Every detail is part of the code. The question is, will you slow down long enough to read it? The narcissist wants you overwhelmed. The enemy wants you exhausted. But God wants you awake, aligned, and aware. So tonight, before you close your eyes, silence the distractions. Say a prayer of clarity, and ask God to help you remember what He shows you. Then write it down, even if it makes no sense. Even if it's just an image, or a word, or a feeling. Because when the time is right, the pieces will come together. And what once felt confusing will suddenly make perfect sense. You're not crazy. You're not broken. You're chosen. And your dreams? They're not just dreams. They're divine blueprints, waiting for you to wake up and understand. Stay tuned. We're just getting started. You've felt it, haven't you? That sudden jolt awake in the middle of the night. Heart racing, breath heavy. The lingering sense that something important was just taken from you. Maybe you remember pieces, a voice, a place, a strange symbol. But within seconds, it fades. And you're left staring at the ceiling, feeling robbed of something you can't explain. That moment? It wasn't random. It was war. You see, as a chosen one, your dreams are more than rest. They're divine meetings, moments where heaven downloads truth into your soul. But just like in waking life, there are forces that fight to interrupt that connection. And sometimes, those forces wear familiar faces. The narcissist in your life, loud, controlling, emotionally draining, may unknowingly become the very tool the enemy uses to keep your spirit distracted. Their chaos doesn't end when the sun goes down. It follows you into your sleep. The stress, the fear, the constant overthinking, all of it creates noise in the spirit realm. So when God sends you a dream to warn, guide, or comfort you, the signal gets distorted. The message gets cut short. And you wake up, not with peace, but confusion. This isn't just sleep disturbance. It's spiritual interference designed to keep you blind. But once you recognize it, once you realize that even your dreams are under attack, you can begin to guard your rest like sacred ground. Because it is. And in those quiet hours, God is still trying to speak. The enemy just doesn't want you to hear Him. There's a kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't cure. A heaviness in your spirit that no amount of rest or silence seems to lift. You wake up tired, your mind cluttered, your emotions tangled, and your thoughts clouded with uncertainty you can't name. And if you're a chosen one, this isn't just emotional fatigue, it's spiritual warfare. Subtle, silent, but devastating. It starts slowly, almost invisibly. You meet someone, a narcissist, who at first seems charming, maybe even safe. They admire you, echo your thoughts, validate your gifts. But before long, the admiration twists into manipulation. The echo turns into control, and the validation gets weaponized. They begin to chip away at your intuition, replacing your inner clarity with confusion. And you don't even notice it happening at first. That's the insidious nature of their favorite weapon, mental fog. It's not loud like rage or violent like slaps. It's quiet like doubt, creeping like smoke. You feel it when you can't make simple decisions anymore, when you second-guess your own thoughts, when you begin to ask for permission to feel what you feel. The narcissist slowly floods your mind with contradiction and chaos, speaking in riddles, changing their narrative, invalidating your emotions, and rewriting history until your truth begins to feel unstable. You start questioning your own memory. You wonder if maybe you are too sensitive, too dramatic, too spiritual, too emotional. And while you wrestle with these questions, something far more dangerous begins to happen in the background. You stop hearing God clearly. Because where confusion lives, clarity can't. Where emotional chaos dominates, divine instruction fades. You stop trusting your instincts, which once whispered warnings. You stop interpreting your dreams, which once carried revelation. You stop listening to the subtle nudges in your spirit, the kind that once protected you from danger. The narcissist distracts your mind so completely that your spiritual radar, once sharp and active, becomes fogged over. Not broken, but muffled, covered, dimmed. You start to confuse God's no with maybe, and his yes with silence. You begin to think he's distant, when in fact, he's been speaking all along. You just can't hear him through the static. That's how the narcissist wins. Not by screaming, but by whispering lies wrapped in logic. Not by locking the door, but by fogging the mirror until you can't see yourself clearly. You become emotionally dizzy, spiritually deaf, and mentally tired. And you don't realize it's a strategy. You don't realize it's warfare. Because it doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like love. Like concern. Like correction. But it's not. It's manipulation wrapped in fake wisdom. It's control dressed as care. And it's meant to drain your discernment. Because a chosen one who can hear God clearly is powerful. A chosen one who can interpret their dreams, obey spiritual warnings, and follow divine timing is unstoppable. So the narcissist doesn't have to destroy you. They just have to keep you distracted long enough that you destroy yourself. You'll stay too long in the wrong places. You'll overlook red flags. You'll tolerate disrespect. You'll call warfare a relationship. And all the while, you'll be praying, asking God why you can't hear him anymore, when in reality, he's been speaking through every dream, every gut feeling, every moment of unease. You just couldn't interpret it. Not because you're not spiritual, but because you're mentally exhausted. Because the narcissist has taken up so much space in your thoughts that God's voice is now competing with theirs. And their voice is louder. Not because it's stronger, but because it's constant. Day after day, they create situations that pull your focus. One moment you're reflecting on a dream you had, trying to decode its meaning. The next, you're in a whirlwind of arguments, accusations, or passive-aggressive silence. By the time the dust settles, you've forgotten the dream entirely. And that was the point. That dream was the warning. That dream was the confirmation. That dream was the signal you prayed for. But the narcissist made sure it got buried under emotional debris. It's a tactic they use without even realizing how spiritual it is. They don't need to burn your journal or delete your prayers. They just need to keep your mind too tired to think deeply, too shaken to trust your discernment, and too overwhelmed to hear God's whispers. And the tragedy is, they often succeed. You go days, weeks, even years in that fog. You operate on autopilot, disconnected from your higher self, numb to your own intuition. You live in reaction, not revelation. You forget what it feels like to move with confidence in your spirit. But something begins to shift when you finally see it for what it is. Not just a toxic relationship, but a spiritual silencer. Not just emotional abuse, but strategic interference. And when that clarity comes, suddenly, the fog begins to lift. You start to see how many divine messages you missed. How many times your dreams tried to warn you. How many mornings you woke up with a heavy heart, not realizing it was spiritual residue from a night interrupted by warfare. You begin to reclaim your stillness, your silence, your space. You begin to hear God again. Not because he was ever silent, but because you finally turned down the noise. You start journaling your dreams. You stop explaining yourself to people who never listen. You pull back your energy. You set spiritual boundaries. You breathe again. And with every step away from the narcissist's chaos, the mental fog begins to clear. You begin to remember who you are. You begin to dream again, clearly, vividly, prophetically. You begin to trust what you see in the spirit. And that terrifies the narcissist. Because now, they can't control you. Not emotionally, not spiritually, not mentally. You're back in alignment, back in clarity, back in your purpose. And most of all, you're hearing God again, loud and clear. You ever had a dream so vivid, so strange, that it stayed with you all day, haunting you with images you couldn't quite explain? Maybe it was a house with endless rooms, or a door you couldn't open. Maybe it was a snake watching you silently from the corner, or a child lost in a storm. Maybe you were flying, or drowning, or walking barefoot down a road that never ended. And you woke up, not scared, but unsettled. A sense that something was trying to speak to you, something holy, but the message was wrapped in mystery. That's because when God speaks to his chosen ones in dreams, he doesn't always use words. He uses symbols. Because symbols bypass the noise, the drama, the confusion, the distractions of this world. They slip past the overthinking mind and go straight to your spirit. But here's where it gets even deeper. The reason you often miss the meaning, the reason you brush it off as just a weird dream, it's because the narcissist in your life has filled your head with so much mental clutter that you no longer trust what your soul is showing you. That strange dream of the locked door? That wasn't random. It was a spiritual warning, God telling you not to pursue that path, to stop trying to open what he has already shut. That recurring image of water flooding your house? It wasn't about rain. It was a prophetic message about emotional overwhelm, about something in your life that is trying to drown your peace. That wild animal you keep dreaming about, whether it's a lion, a snake, a raven, or a wolf, is a symbol of someone in your waking life. Someone whose true nature is being revealed in the spirit, even though they wear a mask in the physical. But how can you interpret divine messages when the narcissist has conditioned you to doubt yourself at every turn? When you're constantly being told you're too deep, too emotional, too intense, or that your dreams don't mean anything? That's the danger of narcissistic influence. It doesn't just affect your self-esteem, it affects your discernment. It makes you brush off what is actually sacred. And the enemy loves that. Because if you start decoding your dreams, if you start seeing the patterns, the warnings, the confirmations, you become too powerful to control. You become spiritually alert, awake, aligned. And narcissists hate that. They prefer you confused. They want you second-guessing everything. So when God sends a dream filled with symbols, you don't take it seriously. You don't write it down. You don't pray over it. You don't reflect. You just move on, and the message gets buried. Forgotten. That's how the enemy keeps the chosen one stuck, not by silencing God, but by distracting you from hearing him. God uses symbolism because it forces you to pause, to reflect, to seek. And in that seeking, you grow. You begin to understand things not just with your mind, but with your spirit. But if your spirit is exhausted, if you're still recovering from the narcissist's manipulations, gaslighting, and emotional abuse, you won't have the energy to decode the dream. You'll dismiss it. You'll let it fade. You'll lose the map that God laid before you while you slept. And that's not a coincidence. That's strategy. You see, narcissists don't just damage your emotions. They interfere with your spiritual downloads. They cloud your intuition so much that when God speaks in metaphor, you miss it. You were never meant to ignore your dreams. Especially not now. Because we are living in a time when chosen ones are being called to higher discernment, to walk by faith, not sight. And dreams are one of the clearest ways God speaks when the world gets too loud. He uses the symbols to guide you, but you must be alert enough to see the meaning. Have you had dreams lately that feel repetitive? Maybe you keep seeing the same person, place, or object over and over, night after night. That's not coincidence. That's God speaking in sequence, trying to get your attention. The number the 3rd of May show up again and again. It symbolizes divine completeness. A staircase may appear. It represents elevation, spiritual growth. A dark forest? It can represent confusion, or a spiritual battle you're meant to walk through with faith. These symbols are not random. They are blueprints, And the narcissist knows that if you start decoding them, you'll outgrow their control. That's why you've been under attack. Not just in your body, not just in your mind, but in your sleep. That's why you wake up feeling foggy. That's why you forget the dream the moment your feet touch the floor. That's why you feel like something important happened, but you can't remember what. Because the narcissist's chaos lingers. It steals your stillness. It interrupts your interpretation. It makes you believe your dreams are meaningless. But they are not. They are sacred conversations between your soul and heaven. And even if no one else around you understands that, you do. Deep down, you've always known your dreams carry weight. That they mean something. That they're trying to show you what your eyes can't yet see. So it's time to reclaim that knowing. To take your spiritual language seriously again. To journal your dreams. To study their symbols. To pray for interpretation. Because God is still speaking. The enemy just doesn't want you to listen. The narcissist may try to mock your spiritual sensitivity. They may say you're too deep, too intense, too much. But you're not too much, you're chosen. And chosen ones don't get ordinary dreams. They get divine messages wrapped in mystery. Because God trusts you to seek the meaning. And when you do, everything begins to make sense. Everything begins to align. The symbols become sentences. The metaphors become messages. And the confusion becomes clarity. So the next time you dream, don't dismiss it. Don't let the narcissist's voice be louder than God's whisper. Sit with it. Pray over it. Ask for insight. Because that dream you had last night, it wasn't just a dream. It was direction. There's a kind of pain that doesn't leave bruises. A kind of warfare that doesn't come with broken glass or shouting matches. It's quieter. More subtle. It hides in the pauses between words, in the long silences, in the twisted looks and backhanded compliments. It creeps in slowly, like fog rolling across your spirit, until one day, you realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. If you're in a toxic dynamic with a narcissist, you know exactly what I mean. The smiles that feel like traps. The conversations that leave you more confused than comforted. The constant walking on eggshells, never sure what version of them you'll get. Warm and charming or cold and punishing. It's a cycle, and once you're caught in it, something inside you begins to dim. You lose your spark. But worse, you lose your signal. The divine one. The voice that used to guide you. That small, still voice you used to trust without hesitation. You used to know things without knowing how you knew. You used to feel when something was off before it ever became visible. You'd get a dream, a chill, a nudge in your spirit, and you'd act on it, and it would save you. But now you hesitate. You question yourself. You delay. You second guess. And the more time you spend in the presence of the narcissist, the more disconnected you feel from that sacred inner compass. It's not your imagination. That disconnection is real. You see, emotional abuse isn't just psychological, it's spiritual warfare. Every time they gaslight you, twist your words, or make you doubt your own experience, they are interfering with the frequency of your soul. They are jamming your spiritual signal. You can't receive clear divine instruction when your mind is flooded with survival mode thoughts. When you're constantly bracing for the next emotional blow, your nervous system is so activated that you can't hear the soft whisper of divine guidance. It's not that God has stopped speaking. It's that the noise of emotional chaos has grown louder than his voice. The narcissist does this by design. Not always consciously, but spiritually, it's intentional. They may never say it, but on some level, they know your spirit is sensitive. They know your intuition is sharp. They know you can see through them. So they create confusion, not clarity. They use emotional abuse to keep you unstable, not because they don't know what they're doing, but because your power threatens their control. And if you're busy trying to explain yourself, apologize for your reactions, or prove that you're good enough, then guess what? You're too distracted to discern. You weren't always this exhausted. You weren't always this unsure. Remember who you were before they tangled you up in their web? You were peaceful. Soft, yet strong. You heard God in everything, in songs, in silence, in sudden feelings that told you to walk away or hold on. You knew your worth, or at least you were on the journey of learning it. But since this relationship began, you've been in a spiritual fog. You pray, but it feels like your words fall flat. You try to meditate, but your mind won't slow down. You journal, but your thoughts are scattered. You have dreams, but you wake up too emotionally drained to even write them down. And all the while, the narcissist continues to pull strings, subtle manipulation, guilt trips, emotional withdrawal, love bombing, then punishment, until you're left chasing their approval, forgetting that you were never meant to chase anything but God's voice. That's how emotional abuse becomes a spiritual block. It replaces divine direction with emotional survival. You can't decode heavenly messages when you're too busy trying to decode someone's mixed signals. You can't walk in alignment when your heart is constantly recovering from emotional landmines. The narcissist becomes your distraction, your confusion, your false god. Not because you worship them, but because your mind is so wrapped up in their behavior that you stop focusing on your creator. And the enemy loves that. Because if he can't destroy you, he'll distract you. And if he can't distract you with sin, he'll use pain. He'll use a narcissist to wound you just enough that you forget who you are. Forget your calling. Forget the dreams. Forget the prophecy. Forget the promises. But even in your most drained, disconnected state, something inside you still whispers, "This isn't who I'm meant to be." And that whisper, that's God. Still speaking. Still reaching. Still waiting for you to notice that your exhaustion is not laziness. It's spiritual interference. That your inability to focus is not a personal flaw, it's emotional burnout. That your silence isn't weakness, it's self-preservation. He knows what's been happening behind closed doors. He knows how many times you've cried in secret, wondering why your spirit feels blocked, why your heart feels heavy, why your prayers feel powerless. He's not mad at you. He's not distant. But he is waiting for you to get honest about the real source of your disconnection. Because once you name it, you can face it. And once you face it, you can begin to rise. You can begin to detox, not just emotionally, but spiritually. You can begin to untangle your identity from their abuse. You can remember what it feels like to walk in peace again. And slowly, the signal starts returning. You start feeling things again. You start dreaming again. You start hearing again. You stop asking for permission to trust your own intuition. You stop looking to the narcissist for answers they were never meant to give. You look up. You look in. And what you find is a version of yourself that's not broken, not weak, not too much, but chosen. You were never meant to spend your life trying to survive someone else's emotional chaos. You were meant to thrive in divine clarity. But that clarity requires space, silence, separation. And sometimes, God will start blocking your peace in a relationship, not to punish you, but to push you toward freedom. You're not crazy for feeling spiritually numb around them. You're not broken for losing focus. You're not less spiritual just because you've been tired. You've been in a battle. But now it's time to reclaim your signal. To get still enough to hear again. To get free enough to receive again. Because God is still speaking. He never stopped. His instructions, His warnings, His love letters, they're still coming. But you've got to get out of survival mode and back into discernment. You've got to stop giving the narcissist front row access to your mind. They don't get to be louder than the voice of God in your life anymore. You've got to protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. And as you begin to do that, as you begin to heal and separate and come back to yourself, you'll notice something. Your clarity will return. Not all at once, but little by little. The fog will lift. The dreams will become clearer. The nudges will become stronger. The signs will come faster. And you'll no longer need validation from the one who tried to silence your soul. Because you'll be too busy listening to the one who made it. The same dream repeats. You're being ignored by you. There's a strange ache that comes from seeing the same dream over and over again. It slips into your nights like a familiar stranger. Same faces, same settings, same emotions, again and again. You wake up unsettled. Again. You brush it off, maybe even laugh it away. Again. But deep down, something stirs. A question you've been too distracted, or too afraid, to answer, "Why do I keep dreaming this?" You try to reason it away. Maybe it's stress. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's nothing. But it's not nothing. It never was. When God wants to get your attention and you ignore him, he repeats himself. Not out of anger, but out of mercy. When the noise in your waking life is too loud, too chaotic, too narcissistically controlled to hear his voice, he speaks through your sleep. And when even that doesn't reach you, he speaks again. And again. And again. Because God doesn't give up on chosen ones. And if the dream keeps coming back, it's not because he's running out of ideas. It's because you're running from a truth that could set you free. You see, repetition in dreams is not random. It's divine insistence. It's your spirit tapping at the locked door of your awareness, trying desperately to remind you of what you're refusing to see. It could be a warning about someone you've let too close, a calling you've ignored, a shift you've resisted, or maybe it's a wound that hasn't healed, one that the narcissist in your life keeps slicing open again and again. And your soul, tired of the cycle, is trying to break through the fog you've been taught to live in. But the problem is, when you're wrapped in emotional abuse, you learn to silence yourself. You learn to say, "It's not a big deal," even when it is. You learn to smile when you're aching, to stay when your spirit says go, and to dismiss the very signs that are trying to save you. That's not just trauma. That's spiritual disconnection. That's how the narcissist wins, not just by controlling your time, your choices, or your voice, but by training you to ignore your own soul. So when the dream repeats, it's not just a message from above. It's a cry from within. It's your higher self saying, "Please, I'm still here. I still know the way." But if you keep pushing it aside, that dream will keep showing up like a mirror you don't want to look into. Because God will never stop reminding you of what you're pretending not to see. Maybe you've been dreaming about a house with locked rooms. Each time you try to open them, they remain closed. That's not just a dream. That's a message. You're trying to access something emotionally or spiritually that can't be opened until you deal with what's been buried. Maybe you've had dreams where you're running, always running, but never getting anywhere. That's not a nightmare, it's a metaphor. You're running from truth, from pain, from transformation. But your spirit is stuck in the same cycle because nothing changes until you face it. Or maybe you keep seeing the same person, the same location, the same unresolved situation. That's not coincidence, it's a spiritual replay, because you haven't resolved it in your heart. And the narcissist in your life? They want you to stay stuck in that loop. Not because they're concerned with your dreams, but because your awakening threatens their control. If you begin to take your recurring dreams seriously, you begin to reclaim the pieces of your soul they've tried to scatter. If you decode the pattern, you take the first step toward breaking free. And they know that. That's why they keep you exhausted, distracted, doubtful. So you forget the dream before you even open your eyes. The narcissist thrives when your soul is numb, when your intuition is dulled, when your discernment is tangled in confusion. They want you to treat divine warnings like emotional static. Because as long as you don't see the dream for what it is, a lifeline, you'll keep repeating the same pain in real life. But let me say this clearly, God does not waste repetition. If he is showing you something more than once, it is because your future depends on you understanding it. Your healing, your calling, your protection. It's all tied to your willingness to finally pay attention. Repeating dreams are not about torment. They are about truth. And you ignoring them doesn't make the truth go away. It only delays the breakthrough. The longer you ignore the dream, the deeper you sink into survival. And that's where the enemy wants you. Too busy surviving to ever discern. But you weren't created to live in confusion. You weren't chosen to stay asleep. When you finally begin to ask, what is this dream trying to show me? You open the door to divine revelation. You shift from ignoring to interpreting, from avoiding to awakening. You begin to notice the symbols, the timing, the feelings. And suddenly, what once felt like chaos begins to make sense. The locked doors in your dream reflect the emotional walls you've built to cope. The storm outside your window is the turmoil within your home. The faceless figure chasing you is your own fear of confrontation, of leaving, of change. And once you see it clearly, you can finally respond, not react, but respond. You can journal. You can pray. You can seek understanding. And more importantly, you can act. Because recurring dreams aren't meant to entertain. They are meant to move you, to decision, to truth, to freedom. But that movement can't happen until you admit that the person who's been ignoring you is you. You've ignored your own voice, your own knowing, your own nudges. Not because you're weak, but because emotional abuse taught you that your inner voice couldn't be trusted. That's the lie the narcissist wants you to believe. That's the stronghold the enemy wants to keep in place. But the moment you start paying attention to that dream, to that repeating pattern in your sleep, you begin to take your power back. You begin to hear again, feel again, choose again. And no narcissist, no manipulator, no spirit of confusion can stop that kind of awakening. So here's your reminder. That dream that keeps coming back is not a glitch. It's grace. It's God saying, "You didn't hear me the first time, but I love you too much to stay silent." It's your spirit saying, "I haven't given up on you yet." It's your future saying, "We're waiting on you to break this pattern." So don't dismiss it. Don't ignore it. And don't let the narcissist make you feel silly for taking your dreams seriously. This is your language with God. Your lifeline. And it's time you stop ghosting your own soul. Write it down. Speak it out. Pray over it. Ask for revelation. And if you don't understand it all at once, that's okay. Understanding will come. What matters is that you're finally listening. Finally remembering that your dreams aren't just dreams. They're messages from the divine, dressed in metaphor, wrapped in mystery, repeated until you're ready to wake up. And now, you're ready. There's something haunting about those dreams where you're running. Not from a person you recognize, but from something bigger. Maybe it's a storm that keeps following you. Maybe it's a collapsing building, a creature, a shadow, or a faceless figure. Or maybe it's not a nightmare at all. Maybe you're flying, suddenly weightless, floating over rooftops and landscapes, your heart pounding not in fear, but in awakening. Maybe you see yourself breaking chains, climbing mountains, opening cages, feeling, for just a moment, completely untouchable. And then you wake up, and everything goes back to the same. The tension in your chest, the heaviness in your bones, the emotional cage you live in during the day. The one created by them. The narcissist. The abuser. The one who smiles and shames you in the same sentence. The one who builds your trust only to break it again. The one who keeps you emotionally starved but spiritually exhausted. But in your dreams, you're free. In your dreams, you've already left. That's not fantasy. That's prophecy. You see, God always shows you the freedom in your spirit before it manifests in your reality. He gives you a glimpse of your soul outside of the cage, so you'll stop mistaking the cage for home. And when you're too tired to listen during the day, too drained, too manipulated, too mentally fogged by the narcissist's mind games, he waits for you to sleep. Because your soul never sleeps. It never stops seeking the light. And when your physical body collapses from emotional exhaustion, your spirit rises. It rises and runs. It soars. It flees. It breaks what you didn't believe could be broken. Because even if your mind is still in bondage, your spirit knows. You were never meant to stay trapped. That dream where you're running from a collapsing building, that's not fear. That's God showing you it's time to leave the structure that's no longer safe. That relationship, that house, that cycle, that dream where you're pushing open a locked door, that's not frustration. It's divine instruction. Push harder. Don't give up. You're closer than you think. That dream where you're flying, light and limitless, seeing things from above, that's your soul remembering what it feels like to live without control, manipulation, or fear. And that moment where you break free from chains, ropes, cages, that's not fantasy. That's God whispering, this is who you really are. This is what's coming, if you choose it. But here's the painful part. Most people wake up and dismiss it. They say, it was just a dream. It didn't mean anything. Or worse, they forget it altogether. Because the moment they wake up, the narcissist re-enters the picture. With a text, a look, a cold shoulder, an argument, a guilt trip. And just like that, the vision of freedom is stolen. Buried beneath shame and fear. You go from flying in your dreams to freezing in your reality. And it feels impossible. Like maybe freedom was just an illusion. But it wasn't. It was a spiritual preview. It was God's way of giving your weary soul a taste of what it could feel like if you left, if you healed, if you believed Him over them. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Narcissistic abuse is more than emotional, it's spiritual captivity. It makes you question your identity, your instincts, your gifts. It makes you feel like escape isn't possible, that this is as good as it gets. But it's not. That's why the dreams come. Not to tease you, but to wake you up. When you see yourself escaping in your dreams, it means God is already working behind the scenes. You're being prepared, spiritually strengthened, loosened from the inside. Because deliverance doesn't start with your feet. It starts with your mind and your spirit. And sometimes, your dreams are the only safe place where that preparation can begin. In the spirit realm, you aren't bound by shame. You aren't frozen by fear. You aren't silenced by the narcissist's lies. In the spirit, you are seen clearly. And God speaks directly, through images, symbols, feelings. Through roads, staircases, wings, waves, doors, bridges. You've probably seen it. The long road stretching ahead, the hidden passageway, the elevator rising, the boat untethering. All metaphors, all messages, all divine encouragement. God is saying, you're ready. It's time. You won't be alone when you go. But the narcissist wants you to ignore that voice, to roll over, forget the dream, and return to the cage they've painted as comfort. They want you emotionally tired, spiritually confused. Because if you ever believed what your dreams were really showing you, you'd walk away. Not just physically, but emotionally. You'd stop looking to them for validation. You'd stop dancing for their crumbs. You'd stop explaining yourself. You'd realize you were free the moment you stopped believing their lies. That's why the most dangerous person to a narcissist is a spiritually awakened chosen one. Because you begin to see things for what they are, not what they pretend to be. You begin to feel again, to pray again, to dream again. You start to see yourself in your full divine identity, not as broken, but as called. And the more those dreams repeat, the closer you are to breakthrough. Don't ignore them. Don't minimize them. Don't let anyone convince you it was just a dream. Because what you see at night may be more real than what you've been living in the day. Those visions of escape, those moments of flying or running free or rising from the pit, those are heaven's blueprints. They are proof that your spirit is already outgrowing the cage. That your soul is rejecting the lies, even if your body hasn't left yet. And that's okay. Because spiritual escape always comes before physical escape. You have to break free on the inside before you ever walk out on the outside. And those dreams? They're your preparation. They're proof you're already healing, already moving, already chosen to be more than a survivor, destined to be a deliverer for others one day. And let's be honest, some of you are still in places that look stable from the outside. Maybe you're married to them. Maybe they're a parent, a boss, a friend. And to leave feels impossible. The guilt, the fear, the uncertainty. You stay, not because you want to, but because you're not sure you'd survive on your own. But those dreams you keep having, they are God's way of saying, you already have wings, you just forgot how to use them. He's reminding you that the prison isn't locked, that the cage isn't sealed, that the chains were psychological, not spiritual. And once you know the truth, you can't know it. Once you've seen yourself free in a dream, you'll never again be content pretending you're not in bondage. That's why the narcissist's games start losing their effect. That's why their control begins to weaken. That's why their silence no longer terrifies you. Because something deeper has awakened. A knowing, a memory, a vision. And it keeps pulling at you, even when you're afraid. That's the power of spiritual vision. It keeps calling you out of what's comfortable and into what's divine. So the next time you dream of escaping, don't downplay it. Don't dismiss it. Don't let their confusion drown it. Write it down. Pray into it. Ask God for confirmation. Because the moment you start treating your dreams like instructions instead of illusions, your life will begin to shift. You'll start seeing exits where you once saw walls. You'll start saying no without guilt. You'll stop explaining yourself to people who refuse to understand you. You'll protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. And slowly, the dream will become reality. The freedom you saw in the spirit will begin to manifest in your everyday life. The voice that whispered run in your dream will begin to roar inside your heart. And you'll know, it's time. Not to escape in fear, but to rise in strength. Because you were never created to be someone's emotional hostage. You were created to walk in truth, in freedom, in divine clarity. And every dream of escape, every vision of flight, every moment of breaking chains, was heaven's reminder that you're not alone and you're not staying. You meet strangers or beings in dreams, pay attention. There's something sacred about the dreams that feel like more than dreams. The ones where someone you've never met looks you in the eye, calls you by name, hands you something, or simply stands with you in complete silence. But you feel it, deep in your spirit, that this was no ordinary figure. No trick of the subconscious. No random face from the day's memory. No, this was a messenger. A presence. A being of light or wisdom sent to cross the veil of sleep and speak to your soul in a way no one else could. And yet, when you wake up, the details begin to dissolve. You remember the feeling, but not the message. You remember the presence, but not the words. You remember they gave you something. But what was it? A scroll? A key? A whisper? And before you can hold on to it, the demands of your waking life crash in. A text from the narcissist. A cold look. A guilt trip. A conversation that twists your mind and drains your energy. And just like that, the dream is gone. The sacred meeting, forgotten. The spiritual message, buried. You're pulled back into the cycle, back into survival mode. And you wonder why you feel so disconnected from your intuition, so removed from your own spirit. But the truth is, you've been having encounters. You've just been too overwhelmed to receive them. Because when you're caught in the emotional grip of a narcissist, your waking hours are consumed with confusion, self-doubt, and emotional labor. You spend so much time questioning your reality, explaining your worth, and tiptoeing around someone else's moods, that by the time you sleep, your soul is exhausted. But that's exactly why God waits until you're asleep to send reinforcements. Because your soul is still listening, even when your body and mind are tired. In that sacred stillness, in that space between breath and oblivion, heaven sends messages. Sometimes they come as dreams. Sometimes they come as people. Or more accurately, beings. And if you've ever dreamed of meeting someone who felt familiar but looked unfamiliar, someone who spoke directly to your spirit and not your ears, that wasn't fiction. That was visitation. Divine contact. It could have been an angel. It could have been an ancestor. A prophet. A guide. Someone assigned to help you carry a message you've been too spiritually distracted to hear in the daytime. Because when God sends you a calling, a warning, or a word of deliverance, He knows the narcissist in your life will try to drown it out. So He sends it to you in code. Through dreams. Through strangers. Through symbols wrapped in flesh. But here's the thing. They only make sense if you pay attention. And many don't. Not because they're blind, but because they've been spiritually dulled. That's what narcissistic abuse does. It doesn't just break your confidence. It interrupts your spiritual signal. It convinces you not to trust what you see, not to believe what you feel. So even when an angel appears in your dream, calm, still, present, you wake up wondering if it was just a dream. Even when you're handed a sword in your sleep, you say, well, that was weird, and move on. Even when a stranger tells you, it's time, you're ready. Walk away, you question whether it meant anything at all. And meanwhile, God is trying to shake you awake through these night encounters. Because the things you've been praying for, the signs, the strength, the clarity, they're being delivered to you in the night. But the narcissist doesn't want you to see that. They want your spiritual attention chained to their moods, their chaos, their manipulation. They want you too tired to remember, too drained to interpret, too numb to feel. Because if you ever started trusting those encounters, those divine visitations, you'd start pulling away. You'd start moving in spiritual authority. You'd realize you don't need the narcissist to explain your worth. You'd realize you've been seen, chosen, protected all along. So pay attention. Have you ever dreamed of being handed something sacred? A book you couldn't open? A key you were told to guard? A message written in symbols? Those aren't meaningless. They are assignments. And every assignment comes with a messenger. That figure in your dream, the one who never changes expression, who radiates peace or urgency, who looks at you like they know you, they do. They know your calling. They know the pain you've carried in silence. They know the spiritual tug-of-war you've endured behind closed doors. And they're not here to comfort. They're here to deliver. To activate something in you. To wake up a part of your spirit the narcissist tried to kill. And even if they never speak a word, their presence is instruction. Their silence is affirmation. And their arrival is confirmation. You're not crazy. You're not alone. You are still on divine schedule. But you have to honor what you saw. You have to stop brushing it off like imagination. Because heaven is patient, but your spirit is desperate. It's been fighting too long to get your attention. And now that you're dreaming again, now that you're seeing visitors again, you must respond. Write it down. Every detail. The colors. The sounds. The way you felt. Ask God to reveal the meaning. Not everything will make sense at once. But over time, those pieces will come together like a puzzle, and you'll see that none of it was random. That dream where the being gave you a scroll but told you not to open it yet? That's divine timing. That dream where someone led you by the hand out of a burning house? That's deliverance. That dream where someone looked you in the eye and said, "You are not what they did to you," that's restoration. You've been visited, chosen one. You've been seen. And you've been marked for movement. But the enemy knows that if you take your dreams seriously, if you start seeing these encounters as holy, you'll stop doubting what God is doing. You'll stop looking for signs from broken people. You'll stop chasing closure. And you'll start walking in obedience. That's why the narcissist's interference ramps up right after these dreams. Ever notice that? The more vivid the encounter, the more cruel or confusing they become the next day. That's no coincidence. It's spiritual retaliation. The enemy is trying to discredit what God just showed you by overwhelming you with earthly noise. But you can't let that happen anymore. Not now. Not after everything you've seen. This is your call to start honoring the divine encounters that happen while the world sleeps. To recognize that your spirit doesn't need daylight to receive light. That these beings who show up in your dreams, they come because God trusts you. Because you're ready, even if you feel like you're not. And when you stop ignoring the messages, when you stop dismissing the strangers, when you start honoring the dream realm as part of your spiritual reality, everything begins to shift. You become more alert, more aligned, more protected. You begin to feel less alone. You begin to remember that you've been guided all along, not by fear, but by something eternal. Something holy. Something unshaken by narcissistic manipulation. And the next time a stranger shows up in your dream, holding a gift, or a warning, or simply their presence, you'll meet their eyes and say silently, "I remember." Because now you know. You're not imagining it. You're being prepared. There are some nights when your dreams don't feel like dreams at all. They feel like war. You don't wake up rested. You wake up sweating, heart racing, shaken, like you've just crossed back into your body after something intense. You may not remember every detail, but you felt it. The running, the fighting, the choices, the confrontation, the heaviness, the silence, the invisible resistance. And deep in your gut, you knew, this wasn't just a dream, it was a lesson. As a chosen one, you don't get to sleep like everyone else. Your dreams are not random flickers of memory and imagination. They're divine classrooms, sacred battlegrounds, places where God trains your spirit while the world sleeps. Because your calling is too great to be casual. He knows your purpose will demand discernment, strength, obedience, and clarity. So he begins preparing you in secret. Not just with blessings, but with tests. He allows you to wrestle in the spirit long before you conquer in the physical. You may dream of battles you don't understand, confronting enemies you've never met, escaping places you've never seen, making decisions that feel real, urgent, even terrifying. And when you wake up, you might feel confused, weak, tired. You might ask, why would God let me dream like this? But the answer is hidden in who you are becoming. A warrior, a prophet, a breaker of chains, a voice in the wilderness. God is building your inner strength in the dark before your public assignment begins in the light. But here's the challenge: most of the time, when you're going through this spiritual boot camp, the narcissist is still in your life. And that's not an accident. The enemy knows that if he can distract you during the day, he can sabotage the test you're meant to pass at night. You see, the narcissist's chaos isn't just emotional abuse, it's a spiritual trap. The constant mind games, the shifting moods, the manipulative guilt, the endless cycle of hurt and hope, it all serves one purpose: to keep your mind so preoccupied with them that you miss what God is doing in you. To keep you too drained to pay attention to the lessons. To keep you from seeing that the dreams you're having are preparing you for a breakthrough the narcissist was sent to block. And if you don't realize that you're being trained, if you keep brushing off the battles in your sleep as meaningless, you'll keep waking up tired, confused, unprepared. And the cycle will repeat. But when you begin to understand that your dreams are a training ground, your whole life starts to shift. You start paying attention. You start asking better questions. You stop fearing the chaos and start discerning the test. You realize that the nightmare wasn't punishment, it was preparation. That the pain wasn't personal, it was prophetic. God is not trying to torment you with these dreams. He's testing your awareness. He's sharpening your instincts. He's strengthening your courage. And sometimes, the only place he can do that is in your sleep. Because in the waking world, your soul is under siege. The narcissist is pulling at your attention. Their words looping in your mind like poison. Their drama playing on repeat like a cursed song. And you can't hear God clearly over all the noise. So he waits for nightfall. When your conscious defenses are lowered. When your soul is exposed. And then, he trains you. Gently. Sternly. Repeatedly. He allows you to face things in your dreams you're too afraid to confront in your waking life. He lets you feel what it's like to say no when you normally say yes. He lets you experience walking away, standing up, fighting back, even if your real-life self hasn't done that yet. Why? Because when your spirit gets used to freedom in the dream, it starts rejecting bondage in reality. That's how healing begins. That's how strongholds break. Not just in therapy, not just in prayer, but in those hidden hours when your soul meets heaven and learns the truth. You are stronger than the narcissist made you believe. Sometimes these night lessons will feel like battles, like you're being chased, hunted, tested. Other times, they'll feel like exams, where every choice you make determines the next scene. You may dream of people offering you deals, giving you false comfort, tempting you to go back. Those aren't just dreams, they're discernment drills. God is training your spiritual eyes to recognize the counterfeit before it traps you. Because in real life, the narcissist keeps shapeshifting. Sometimes loving, sometimes cold, sometimes sorry, sometimes cruel. And if you don't learn to see past the performance, you'll keep falling for the same trap. That's why the dreams don't let up. Because God is not raising you to be easily deceived. He's raising you to lead others out of the very pit you're climbing out of now. That's why the curriculum is hard. That's why the tests come without warning. Because the anointing on your life is real. And it can't rest on someone who's still chasing validation from people sent to destroy their voice. So how do you respond to this training? First, you wake up and remember. Don't rush out of bed and forget what your soul just went through. Write it down. Pray over it. Ask for understanding. Second, you guard your energy. Stop giving the narcissist your spiritual attention. Every moment you spend analyzing their behavior is a moment lost from studying your own divine lessons. Third, You start partnering with God in your dreams. Before you sleep, ask Him, "What are you trying to teach me tonight?" And after you wake, ask, "What do you want me to carry into today?" And finally, don't be afraid when the dream feels like a war. The intensity is not a sign that you're being attacked. It's a sign that you're being refined. Just like gold in the fire. Just like oil crushed from olives. Just like warriors trained in the wilderness. The narcissist will never understand this. They will mock your dreams, minimize your spiritual gifts, accuse you of being too sensitive or too deep. Why? Because they are spiritually blind. They don't dream like you do. They don't carry what you carry. And they certainly don't want you to wake up and realize that your dreams were never weird. They were weapons. That your nightmares were never meaningless. They were missions. That your restlessness was never dysfunction. It was divine instruction. You were being trained. Not punished. Not broken. But built. For something greater than this pain. For something louder than their lies. For a purpose that will outlive their manipulation. So the next time you wake up from one of those dreams, don't panic. Pause. Breathe. Reflect. Because God just showed you something most people never get to see. He let you sit in His classroom. He let you fight in His arena. He let you feel the power of who you are becoming. And the more you pass these night lessons, the clearer your mornings will become. The stronger your choices. The firmer your boundaries. The louder your no, because once God trains you in the spirit, the enemy loses power in the physical. The narcissist loses access. The fog lifts. The veil tears. And you remember who you were always meant to be. Not a victim of confusion, but a vessel of clarity. Not a casualty of manipulation, but a carrier of revelation. Not someone waiting to be rescued, but someone already equipped for the rescue mission. There's a strange kind of morning that most people never talk about. The kind where you wake up not with clarity, but with a weight. Not with memory, but with a presence. You open your eyes, and everything feels off. Like something important happened, but you can't name it. A conversation. A warning. A message. A moment that left its fingerprints on your soul. Even though your mind can't replay the scene. You sit up in bed, haunted not by fear, but by a deep knowing. Something happened last night. You feel it in your chest. You feel it in your bones. A heaviness. A stillness. A presence that didn't leave when the dream faded. And yet, your conscious memory comes up empty. You can't recall the dream. You don't have the vision. You don't know the message. But the ache in your spirit tells you, you were visited. Something sacred was whispered. Something urgent was spoken. And now, you're walking through your day feeling spiritually full, but mentally blind. And you question yourself. Was it nothing? Was it just a bad night? Was it my emotions? But deep down, something keeps nudging you, softly yet persistently. Pay attention. Don't ignore this. Because when you wake up heavy, it's not random. When your body is up but your soul feels tethered to something unseen, it's because heaven moved while you slept. And though the dream may be gone from your short-term memory, the message is still alive in your spirit. It was planted, not erased. Hidden, not forgotten. Waiting, not lost. The problem is, most of us move too quickly through the fog. We roll over, pick up the phone, start scrolling, or get sucked into the day's chaos, especially if we're entangled with a narcissist. Their presence, their energy, their emotional demands are like a storm that chases your soul back into silence. They don't want you remembering your dreams. They don't want you interpreting your spirit. Because the moment you start listening to that quiet weight inside, you'll stop listening to them. You'll start trusting your intuition. You'll start noticing how drained and distorted their presence makes you feel. And that's dangerous to them. Because they survive on your spiritual confusion. They thrive when you doubt yourself. So if they can intercept your mornings, your most spiritually vulnerable moment, they win. If they can argue, distract, love bomb, or guilt trip you before you even get to process what your spirit just experienced, they've succeeded in clouding the message God planted while you slept. But here's what most people don't realize. Just because you don't remember the dream doesn't mean you didn't receive the message. Your soul doesn't forget. Your spirit doesn't misplace what God placed inside. That emotional weight you wake up with? It's evidence that your inner being is still holding something sacred. It may not be clear yet, but it's there. So don't dismiss it. Don't brush it off. Don't say, "It must have been nothing." No, it was something. It was everything. And the more you honor that feeling, the more you begin to trust the weight of the unseen, the more God will start unlocking the message in layers. Maybe later in the day, you'll hear a word that triggers the memory. Maybe in prayer, the emotion will come rushing back with pictures. Maybe a conversation, a scripture, or a sound will break open the fog and the message will surface like a lost treasure. But that can only happen if you make space for it. That's why journaling is so powerful. Not because you always remember the dream, but because you honor the feeling. Because you show God you're listening, even if you don't have all the details. You write, "Woke up heavy. Felt like I had a conversation. I can't remember, but I feel watched over, or warned, or held." And that simple act of obedience begins to align your spirit with revelation. You shift from forgetting to receiving, from doubting to discerning. Because God speaks in layers. Sometimes He'll show you the vision. Sometimes He'll give you the emotion. And sometimes He'll just give you the silence and wait to see if you lean in. And here's the truth. Narcissistic energy is designed to make you forget. To keep you distracted from the divine. Their words, their reactions, their gaslighting, their sudden mood swings. It all keeps you in a loop of self-defense. And when you're always defending, you're not discerning. That's not your fault. That's spiritual warfare. So when you wake up heavy and confused, and you still find yourself needing to comfort or explain yourself to someone who causes pain, that confusion multiplies. It thickens. And eventually, you stop even noticing the weight. But God hasn't stopped speaking. He hasn't stopped visiting you in your sleep. It's just that your recall is under spiritual assault. And the only way to break it is to create space. Space to feel. Space to listen. Space to sit with the invisible and say, "I don't remember what you said, but I believe you said something. Show me again." That prayer alone opens portals. That hunger alone invites clarity. Because God is not looking for perfection. He's looking for engagement. He wants to see if you're paying attention, even when you don't have all the facts. That's how trust is built. That's how spiritual memory returns. So the next time you wake up heavy, disoriented, feeling like something happened but you can't grasp it, don't run from it. Stay still. Put your hand on your heart. Breathe. Say, "What am I still carrying?" Write one sentence. Whisper one prayer. Reflect instead of rushing. And notice how the narcissist in your life will suddenly need something. Suddenly send a message. Suddenly start chaos. Because they feel the shift. They sense your spiritual senses waking up. And they're afraid of what will happen if you stop chasing their attention and start listening to God's. They're afraid of what you'll remember. Of what you'll reclaim. Of who you'll become once the fog lifts. So they'll do whatever it takes to keep you spiritually numb, especially in the morning. But you don't have to play that game anymore. You've been marked. You've been spoken to. You've been shown things your conscious mind couldn't hold. But your spirit did. And that's why the heaviness lingers. Because your spirit is waiting for you to acknowledge what it already knows. So be gentle with yourself. Be curious. And most of all, be open. Because some of God's most powerful messages don't come in words or images. They come in silence. In wait. In the knowing without knowing. And if you stay open, stay humble, stay still, the message will reveal itself. Not because you forced it, but because you honored it. Because you made space in a noisy world. And in that space, healing begins. Direction arrives. And the narcissist's power over your perception begins to crumble. Because once you start honoring what your spirit carries, you stop needing confirmation from people who live in confusion. You stop asking the wrong people for permission. And you begin walking in a clarity that can't be manipulated, a peace that can't be stolen, and a strength that was always in you, just waiting to be remembered.